Friends, I'm pleased to share God's words with you this Sunday morning. The theme for our meditation today is finding God in the midst of coronavirus pandemic. In the light of the passage where we read Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. A taxi driver and a parish priest reach heaven at the same time. They meet St. Peter there, and Peter takes the taxi driver to a big palace and says, "This is where you have to live, and God has rewarded you with this palace for all that you have done when you were in the world." And the priest thought he would get a bigger palace. But Peter took him to a small hut and said, "This is where you are going to live eternally." The priest thought for a few moments and asked Peter, "Peter, I think you have got it wrong. Probably that palace is mine and this hut is the taxi driver's." Peter replied, No, I got it right. The reason is when you were preaching, people were sleeping. But when the taxi driver was driving, people were praying. I say that story for two reasons. One reason is if you feel sleepy, you can go and make a cup of coffee or tea and come back. We are going to see some important things today. The second reason is if you can see a tourist spot, a beautiful place from 4 different roads, and you go on a taxi, enjoying that beauty, at the end, you know that place so much better. You have enjoyed the beauty from 4 different sides. And that's what we are going to do. We are looking at the gospel story from 4 different angles. While we do that, we will also see how to find God in the midst of the pandemic we are going through. Finding God is a process. They say faith is often caught than taught. But we have to put our effort into finding God. It takes time. When I met my wife, I had to spend time to get to know her. And I had to learn how she thinks, what she's interested in, her hobbies, her experiences, and her life. The same thing for her. But we are married for about 17 years now. Now, when my wife rings me, I immediately know her voice. And it's the same for her. I don't have to say who I am. I just speak. But it took time. It took time to learn each other. It's the same with God. The more the time we spend with God, the more we learn how to find God. What is in the mind of God? So the point is, it takes time. Finding God takes time. I found God when I was at college. I took time. I prayed about it. I wasn't sure whether there was a God, but I prayed about it. And after a long period of seeking and searching, I found God one day in something very ordinary. I saw a beautiful flower and realized that is God. Now, I have seen many beautiful flowers before that, but because I took the time and put the effort into it, God revealed Himself to me. And it was the most joyful day in my life. Some others see the love of Jesus on the cross and find God in God's love. And there are many different ways people come to God. Some people read a Bible story and find God there. Some people listen to Christian music and find God there. Others learn about what other people believe and find God in the faith of others. There are different ways to find God, but we have to put the time there. The second way is we have to get desperate. If somebody holds you underwater, you want to get out to get some oxygen, some air. You got to get desperate to find God. Now is a good time for us. We are in the middle of this pandemic, and we can ask God, take time, put the effort, and ask God to reveal Himself to us. God promises that those who seek Him will find Him. It's not might, but will find Him. God keeps His promises. So we find God when we seek Him. Don't give up until you find God, because God is always on His way to find you and me. We will come back to finding God as we go through the story, but first we look at one side. Remember the taxi? We are on the front side of this beautiful place, and we look at this story from the front angle. The front angle is to ask the question, why did John bother to write this story? John could have ignored this story, but why did he put this into the Bible? Why did he put it into his letter? For John, this is a miracle story. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, and he thought it's very important to record it. He thought many people should know about it, and that's the reason he wrote in his gospel. If you look at John's gospel, John calls miracles sign. All the miracles in John's gospel are called signs. For example, he writes about Jesus changing water into wine. That's the first miracle. And John ends the story by saying, that was the first sign through which Jesus revealed His glory to others. When Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, for John, Jesus was revealing God's glory, God's power, what God can do. God can bring life out of nothingness. God can provide new life. So for John, this is a sign. John, by saying Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, wants to tell you and me that is what God is capable of. Nothing is impossible with God. He reveals His glory, and it's a sign. If I go out of my home to the main road, there is a sign which says this way is to Worthing and this way is to London. Let's say I take the direction of London and keep going, and that sign leads me to London. In the same way, For John, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead is a sign to say, stick with this God. Even in the midst of this pandemic, God is powerful. God is in control. And God will get us out of this. Now we go to the other side, the second side, let's say the left side, to see this beautiful place, this beautiful passage from a different angle. That is through the eyes of Martha and Mary. They have lost their brother, Lazarus, and they were sad. They were in the midst of bereavement. It was a sad day for them, and they send a message to Jesus. And if you look at that passage, they send message to Jesus, but Jesus waits for another 2 days before he comes to meet Martha and Mary. He doesn't rush to come to see Lazarus and his sisters, but he waits there. What we can learn from this passage, looking through the eyes of Martha and Mary, is God sometimes waits to teach us something, to reveal his glory. And on the 4th day, they saw God's glory in an abundant way. Some people ask, why does God allow this pandemic? Why did he allow it now? It could be a call to turn back to God. The sisters send message. We can send message through prayer. And now it's a good time. We can take time and look unto God in prayer and pour our heart to God. We shouldn't always think that it is sin that causes these problems. It could be, but even families that were loved by Jesus go through this difficulty. Jesus loved this family, and they too, these sisters, Martha and Mary, they too face a difficulty. But Jesus comes to them and helps them. No, so now we are in the midst of social distancing and self-isolation. We can, as Jesus in another passage suggests, we can lock ourselves into a room and pray. Because when we pray that way, God sees us and he listens to our prayers. We can send our messages and listen to God in prayer. And that's what we learn from the angle of Martha and Mary. When we wait for God, he comes to us and he will get us through this. Let's say we have come to the right side now and we look at the story from the eyes of Lazarus. So Jesus comes, he weeps there. Jesus wept. And he weeps when we weep. He identifies with us in our pain. When we struggle, especially now at this through this pandemic, he weeps with us. But he doesn't stop there. He takes the next step and he raises Lazarus from the dead to life. And people see the power of God. People see the love of God, and the glory of God was revealed there. I watched a play a few years ago called Lazarus Lazarus Laughed. And in that play, Lazarus keeps smiling. He keeps laughing because now he has got this new life, second life, a life without fear of death. Now he is brought back to life and he's not afraid of death anymore. He preaches the good news of God in Jesus, and he ends up in prison. The Roman soldiers put him in prison, and they bring him to the emperor. And the emperor says, I will punish you. You have to stop glorifying God. You have to stop glorifying Jesus. And he says, I can't do that. And the emperor said, I will put you to death. And Lazarus then says, there is no death. There is only life. When we die here, we really go to God. So you really can't kill me. There is only life. There is only life and life for people of God. So he doesn't panic. He's not fearful. He's not afraid. And the Roman emperor gets very confused. He has never seen a man with no fear of death. And in that play, Lazarus looks more powerful than the emperor. And the emperor lets him go because he feels so small before a man who has lost his fear of death. And through the right side, through that angle, when we see this story through Lazarus' point of view, we are invited to learn that we don't have to live in fear. God is all powerful, and there is only life and life and life for God's people. Finally, we look at this story from the rear angle, from the fourth side. And that is the side of today. So what? Now what? Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. What is the relevance of this story now? If I am honest, I haven't seen anybody being raised from the dead in my life. We don't see many people being raised to life today. But I think that is why God has kept his church in this world. One of the purposes of the church is to be a family. And in a family, we comfort each other. When somebody loses their brother or sister, you or I can be their brother or sister. When somebody loses their friend, we can be their friend. When somebody loses their parent, we can be their parent. When somebody loses their child, we can be their child. People mourn when they lose someone because that person is no longer there to be loved. They don't have that person to love. And we can step in and be a friend to that person. They also mourn because they don't receive that love from the person they lost. They miss that love they have lost from the person who had passed away. And we can go in. We can't be that person, but we can try and show love to the person who is going through bereavement. And that is one of the purposes of the church. So in today's world, many are losing lives. Of course, we have to keep our distance, but we can still keep in touch with friends through phone calls, through emails, through live streaming, through other electronic means of communication. But this is a time to find God. God is inviting us to turn back to him and to find him. Those who seek God will find God. That is his promise. Let us put that effort. Let us take the time and look unto God and seek him and find him. Because when we find God, life changes. Life changes beyond our imagination. We are filled with joy, filled with purpose, filled with new life. Uh, we don't have to wait till we die for this new life. This new life can begin now. So may this story uplift us today, uh, and may we take some time to find God even in the midst of this pandemic. And may God